This time on PedalBox, we're catching you up on a bunch of work we've been doing off camera, including a vast amount of 3D printing. Although I suppose the volume we got out of it probably isn't that useful compared to the amount of filament we used. Now, as we're recording this, we haven't finished doing the last episode. The front of the car is still ongoing. We're just waiting for filler and paint to dry. So whilst we're waiting on that, we're doing something more useful. And that's where catching you up on a bunch of work is actually coming from. And the first thing we're going to look at is these intercooler pods, because we've been kind of ignoring the problem of making a grille for these for quite some time. Obviously, we've made the grille at the front of the car, but this one is a lot smaller, and that presents a few challenges compared to what we did there. So we made a grille for the front of the car quite some time ago with this nice big chunky hexagon mesh in a metal frame. But making a metal frame to fit in this small hole was going to be very difficult. We thought, now we've got a 3D printer, we can print away our problems. And that's exactly what we did. And why use an additional mesh when we can just print the mesh into the piece? Like this. So after half a dozen or so iterations, we had a nice frame that actually worked quite nicely into the void in front of the intercooler, and we printed this hexagon mesh inside of it, which was an enormous amount of geometry. The problem with that was we wanted something that was really very strong compared to this. This stuff, the grille that we're using on the front, is about 4 or 5 millimeters thick. It's incredibly tough when you try and sort of puncture through it. We did a test on one of the scrap pieces, and it's really difficult. It is extremely strong. This, at 3 or 4 mil, in lots of very thin pieces, really isn't. It's not going to provide that much protection to the front of the intercooler from anything coming down going in. It's just going to be another interface that makes the hole in the intercooler instead of whatever's hitting it. So that was kind of a bit of a loose end. So we started again. Took the same frame and made it in 2 pieces with a recess that we could put a metal mesh into, which is the design that we've eventually gone with. So this side works. We've done a little bit more testing to make sure the fit works nicely, and this is now ready for the mesh to go in, which is what we're going to do today. Now we've got the other side of the car to do as well, which you would think, well, we just print another one of these, right? No, that's by a wide margin not what we had to do. The shape, angle and size of this is very, very different on the other side. So again, after another half dozen or so attempts with these ones, I now have a matched version of this in 2 pieces that clips together, ready to go in the other side. But for now, we're going to get this one done and see how it fits. This is what we're going to use in the grille. It's just an aluminium expanded mesh, and it just fits nicely inside like that. Now, having fit this in, one thing does concern me, and that is the amount of overlap there is at the edge for this mesh to actually adhere to. And I am a little concerned that it's not going to be enough, because I'm hoping I can use hot glue. When we did the front grille originally, we used silicone adhesive, and that just didn't bond to the metal well enough. It was a bit of a test, and eventually we had to change that. But with this all being printed, I'm not entirely sure how the hot glue is going to bond onto here. So this is going to be a little bit of an experiment still to see whether it works. And if it does, brilliant. If it doesn't, well, we'll have to go and reprint these with a slightly wider edge for it to glue onto, which is even more of a shame because the version of these for the driver's side of the car are currently printing in the house.
So here is one semi-assembled intercooler protector. We're all together now, we've got the 2 layers around our mesh. It's sandwiched fairly nicely, we just need to actually bond it in place. So we've trimmed all around the mesh. That was fairly laborious because we're quite sensitive on dimensions here. So we've trimmed every single little piece just to the right size to fit inside the teeth on our frames. And now we're going to glue it all into place. So we're going to take the thing, get the mesh kind of lined up right in there. So same as last time, we're going to use hot glue to secure the mesh onto the plastic and to secure the other plastic onto it as well. And here you're going to see the biggest difference between our 2 designs now. There's a bunch of other like little bits that we've changed just to make anchoring it into the car a little easier. But if I compare to the previous surrounds that we had, where there's a lot less lip, you can possibly see just how much harder over time we'd have getting the glue to kind of secure the mesh there. And also if there's any little bend in it, it would pop out quite easily. So can throw that one away and get our new surrounds back, and we'll start getting around this and anchoring it all in place. Have I got this the wrong way around? I do. Here we go. Okay, cool. So now we just have to get the glue off of all the top faces, all the bits where it's high. Well, we're all done, this is assembled. It didn't go quite as well as we hoped, but it went about as well as we expected. So putting the hot glue on the first layer, we ended up with a couple of high spots, which meant that the top part of the frame didn't quite press down fully. You can see on this edge here, maybe you can't, but take my word for it, there is still a little bit of a gap between the two halves. We've got a couple of little bits of glue hanging out the edges a few places, but honestly, it's together, it's mostly good, and this should serve its purpose. We did kind of guess that we might end up with a gap across the edge, and part of our plan, we were hoping not to have to, but part of our plan was we could just go over the edge of this with a soldering iron and melt the plastic back together. Because this is PLA, it's thermoplastic, you know, it's designed to be melted and joined and everything. That's obviously what the 3D printer itself is doing. We could just do the same again, albeit the soldering iron isn't obviously as precise or controlled, but for something like this, just to kind of melt an edge together, it's totally fine. I've done it before in a few projects. It doesn't really look pretty, it might kind of mangles up the edges, but it does work. So we're going to seal up that edge, turn this into one piece of plastic with the mesh in the middle, and move on. We have learned a couple of lessons. There's a few things that we'd like to do if we ever have to remanufacture these. What we probably ought to do is actually put glue kind of injection ports around the frame so that we can sandwich the whole thing together as we want it, and then just squirt the hot glue in by kind of pressing the snout of the glue gun into a little hole in the frame and have it sort of flow in. But given that this has kind of worked, and given that we've already got the other frame printed, we're kind of happy with how this has come out, so we're going to crack on and only do that if we ever have to remake them. So these are all stitched together now, so the frames have now become one piece of plastic, joined in quite a few places across the side, and there's no real, you know, sort of splaying apart of them anymore, so these are now nice and solid and ready to install. They're not in perfect condition. There are a couple of issues I've already mentioned, but one that you may have spotted on the shot there is we did have a little bit of lift on the printed face here. In fairness, that's completely our own fault, not really the printer's. We've got a pretty good 3D printer up there, but we've not been cleaning the bed in between prints. We've done so many runs of these that we just kind of got lazy. But for the part, it's completely fine. It's not going to compromise it in any way, so we're going to throw it in. Obviously, if we have to do another one, we'll make sure to clean it and do it right, but these are perfectly fine as they are. Well, now hopefully in among all the black metal and the dark void in there that contains our intercooler, you can see the black painted face of the heat exchanger. And I'm just going to pop the grill in there. Now it might be a bit tricky to see because it is black plastic and black mesh on a black intercooler in a black car, but it does fit really quite nicely. It's quite a nice fit in there as well. There's a couple of mil of play around on the sides, not even a couple of mil actually, and a little bit top to bottom. Now we've thought about a few different ways of securing them in to take up that slack and things like that. One of our ideas earlier was to use like a big rubber seal around the outside that would kind of press in and just kind of sit there as like a rubber sort of like friction fit. The problem with that is to get that you need quite a big seal, and then all of a sudden we've got our duct here, we've taken a bunch of it off for the seal, we take a bunch of it off for the flange to hold the mesh, and a nice big intercooler area will have become quite small. So to save as much of that cross-sectional area as we can, we're sticking with this, we're keeping quite a narrow edge, and we're just going to secure it in place with something like panel sealant later on. Now for now, given that this thing isn't properly painted, we still need to do some more work in the side pods and plumbing and everything, we still need access through here. So we're not going to bond them in place quite yet, because removing the intercoolers you don't strictly need to be able to get a hand through from the front, but it's really, really useful. And there's a few other bits and pieces besides as well. But we are going to leave them in place through winter to see how they deal with conditions, because we're actually not yet sure how these 3D printed parts will deal with the atmosphere, with the rain, I mean, not that they'll get much in there, but like ultraviolet and things from the sun. So we're going to leave those in, just sat, and see how they hold up. And if you want to support us in our insanity, you can also jump on shop.pedalbox.show, where you can buy hats, hoodies, mugs, all sorts of bits and pieces that we've got available for you. And you can also jump on patreon.com/pedalboxshow and support us there from as little as $1 a month. Well, that's everything for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.